How does Quran want you to see reality? How does it want you to see the world, see yourself, see God, see your future, understand your past? All of that are the questions answered in the Makkan Quran, the fundamental questions, the existential questions are the subject of the Makkan. Quran it's through the stories of the prophets, or it's through reflecting on creation, or the story of the original human being Adam, or the story of our future in Judgment Day, or heaven and hell. Those details are which part of the Quran, the Quran. Why? Because first you have to build the world view. This is how you view the world now that you view the world in this way. Your framework is right now. Allah will tell you what is right and what is wrong, what is halal and what is haram. That happens where that doesn't happen in Makkah, mostly, with very few exceptions. For the most part, the legal discourse of the Quran, or the social laws of the Quran here, are the rules for marriage here, are the rules for inheritance here, are the rules for, even fighting here, are the rules for zakat here, are the rituals for Hajj. Here's the rituals for fasting. All that stuff was not talked about in Makkah, that was talked about in Madinah, so that you can think of it as Makkah is the world view. One way to think about that is we talked about I'm using other language now. Makkah is about building the Quran's world view, and then the Madan Quran is about the Quran's legal code and the social code, the practical side, okay. So it's like theory and application kind of, right? If the opening ayat are talking about Allah and who Allah is and what Allah does, then that sounds like the worldview side, doesn't it? That's why they said. This sounds so with that background. I want you to understand something. About Medina, you probably already know this, but it's important to say this at the introduction because it will frame our understanding of what this is talking about. Allah says the Quran, we broke it apart. So we could send it down to you, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, at the perfect occasion. Means the anticipated occasion, but in sports. Terminology at the clutch moment, right? That's the idea, is when Quran came, it came at the most needed moment, and there were times where it wasn't the time to send the ayah. It was afterwards right. It would come at that right time. Well, if this surah came in Medina, then we have to understand the moment, because it came in that particular historical moment. One thing I want you to know about Medina is you can divide people by race or by tribe. So the Medina had tribes like O and K, or it had the Jewish tribes like B, U, no, right. Other tribes you can divide people by race, or tribe you can divide people by their geography. Oh, these are these are the end people of Makkah, people of Medina, but we're not going to divide them like that. We're going to divide them in a spiritual sense. Spiritually speaking, the Muslims, not the non-Muslims. We're not talking about the non-Muslims right now. The Muslims of Medina were divided into 3 groups. The Muslims, I'm not talking about non-Muslims. I'm talking about who the Muslims of Medina were divided into. 3 groups. The first group, Quran's own words, the first and the foremost, that belong to the Muhajirun and belong to the Ansar, the top tier, right? The all-stars of the ultimate believers, the true sincere believers. They are these people have proven their faith by being the first to show loyalty to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to the demands that Allah makes. These are the top of the top among the Sahaba, both from Makkah and from Medina. Both, don't be confused, are not just from Makkah. Allah says they're from both there. The top rank believers are from Makkah, and from also Medina. Then will use the Quran's language, those who followed them with excellence. So there are the second group I'll call the first group, the truest believers. Okay, for simplicity, the truest believers, the second group, I will call them the Muslims. What am I calling them? The Muslims. That's not a bad thing, is it? No, it's not the greatest, but it's also not bad. They're Muslim. They've accepted Islam. They're doing their best. They're doing whatever they can, but they're not the first they're not jumping at the first opportunity, and they can also mess up. Sometimes they can also make mistakes. Sometimes they can also miss a prayer here and there. They might do something that's haram and then come to the Prophet wasallam and say, I did this, what should I do? I messed up, so you'll find. In Medina, there are Muslims who are good people, but they also fell into sin. They also showed weakness. They also sometimes didn't spend the way they should have, or didn't show up for battle that happened even. Among the Muslims, so the first category is the true believers, or the truest believers. The second category is what the Muslims and their kind. Of up and down, just like us up and down actually a lot of times. When people talk about the Sahaba, they paint the picture that all of them were in. The same category, right? And that's a mistake. That's not historically correct. That's not correct according to the Quran. And it also creates a problem for us, because then we like, I'm no Abu Bakari, which means I'm going to hell, right? So, because if everybody's up here, then they're all the way up here and I'm all the way down underneath the basement. So I ain't never going to get then there's nothing to relate to. But there's that middle category that I'm calling the Muslims. The Quran uses a word for them. I'll get to that last actually. So how many categories did? I tell you there are supposed to be 3, right? I've given you 2. The third category is hypocrites, and hypocrites are 2. The third category has 2 subcategories. 3, number 3 has 3A and 3BI. Need you to know both of them okay. 3A is people who are not Muslim at all. They're just pretending to be spies. They're FBI, okay, they're agents. They're agents. They went into the Muslim community with no intention of actually ever accepting the religion truly okay. They entered with came in with disbelief. They never intended to believe, and they left with it. In fact, there was a scheme that Allah described and they came up with. A scheme together. They said, look, that some of the knowledgeable rabbis in Medina, they said a lot of our Jewish brethren are becoming Muslim, and they used to think of us as scholars, so we should capitalize on that. Some of you knowledgeable Jewish leaders should become Muslim during the day, go join the Muslims, and then by the end of the day say, look, we checked what the Torah says, we check what he's saying, we thought he's confirming what the Torah says, but after further investigation, he's not really a prophet. And then you'll come out, and when you come out, then the Jews that became Muslims will, well, my rabbi did the research and he left, so maybe he's right about something, maybe I should use his credibility to leave Islam too. That was their hope, that those kinds of people, they entered Islam sincerely or already without Islam. That's 3A people that are not Muslim to begin with, and then they pretend to be Muslim just to cause discord in the Muslim population. I believe a lot of Muslims on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube Reels, a lot of them I have a feeling that they're not really Muslim because they say some of the craziest things no Muslim has ever said, like, I've traveled the Muslim world and I know what Muslim crazy looks like. But the Muslim crazy on Twitter is some other level of that's, I don't know, I had, never I. Never seen crazy like that that's planted in just to create conversation among the Muslims and drive them crazy. I feel like Allah okay anyway, so. That's 3A, but there's also what 3B. 3B is people who came into Islam like the Muslims category 2, they're Muslim, but when they came in and Islam got to ending, they started feeling like I didn't sign up for this, like this is hard weight. What do you mean I got to? Change the way I dress, I can't be friends with this person. We're just friends. He's just like my brother. Well, I can't do that anymore. Wait, we're going to war with Ma, bro. I thought Islam is peace, the meaning of Islam, peace. I heard that at a seminar, and now you're telling me we got to prepare for war. I don't know about this. So they started stepping back. They came in sincerely, but when that the day started making demands, then they started retreating a little bit. And when they started retreating, they didn't want to feel like they're cowards or not committed. So they started creating, when someone does the wrong thing, they have 2 choices. Either they can say, look, I messed up. Those are the weak Muslims. That's category 2. But the hypocrite, when they mess up, they're like, no, it feels too bad to admit that I'm messed up. I'm just going to start talking about how everybody else is messed up, so that the hypocrites will go, these Muslims will go to other Muslims who are spending in the path of Allah and say, are you crazy? Do you have any savings? Don't you have a family to take care of? You stupid, why are you spending this much money? Why are you donating all of this? Are we going to believe like these idiots believe? Look at. These guys, they're from Makkah, right? Oh, they're the best believers. All of them are homeless, bro. All of them are living on welfare with us. Have you seen? This is what you want for your life. This is Islam. Allah doesn't want you to become homeless, okay? You don't have to be so extreme in. Other words, instead of seeing the fault in themselves, they started finding fault in those who actually believe, and they're not spies, but they're covering their own inadequacy by projecting it onto the Muslims and demoralizing the Muslims and making fun of the Muslims. This is 3B, so I've given you, now it's supposed to be 3, but now it's kind of turned into 4. Isn't it so? What was the first group, number 1, the truest believers, those the Muslims, number 3, hypocrites, have how many groups? This is the Muslim population of Medina. Now let's compare this to the Muslim population when we used to be in Mecca. You know how many groups there were in the Muslim population in Mecca. Just 1, the truest believers, that's it. You don't got no number 2, you don't got no number 3, you only got number 1. That's all you had, because the moment you came into Islam in Mecca, you got beat up, you got cussed out, you got humiliated, so nobody had just going to see what it feels like. You didn't have that luxury in Mecca. You didn't have that luxury in Mecca that is a phenomenon in Medina. You with me so far? Okay, now this introduction is really important, because this introduction is going to help you, not just with it, will help you with from Surah number 57 all the way to Surah number 666. This is the introduction. This is the introduction. Now you with me so far? Yeah. Okay, I got to keep track of time. Okay, I have good amount of time, 24 minutes. Allah uses a phrase. I'll use the first part of it to address the Muslims, to address everybody that He uses. Let me tell you something about it. Includes 3 groups of people. That phrase includes 3 groups of people. When I say it includes 3 groups of people, do you know what I'm talking about already? Now it includes the top tier believers. It includes the Muslims. It also includes the hypocrites. That is why I like to translate with, I want you to think about it as those of you who claim to believe. Those of you that have actually accepted the faith, you've accepted the faith, your intentions vary, your commitment varies, where you stand with it varies, but at least you've accepted it now. When He says you, should not be mistaken that He's talking to only category 1. He's talking to who all 3 now. Let me tell you, one of them, one group who does some, says one thing but does another. Which one of these 3 groups says one thing but does another? 3 hypocrites. They say one thing and they're two-faced, right? Listen to this ayah in this same series of surahs. He says, those of you who have iman, why do you say that what you don't do? Wait, the people who say what they don't do are not the people of iman. The people who say what they don't do are the hypocrite. Hypocrites, aren't they? So the ayah should be, but that's not what the ayah says. The ayah says why? Because this is very wise of the Quran. This is part of Allah's wisdom in the Quran. He covered all 3 groups with one phrase. So the Muslims don't categorize each other. Allah categorizes them. Allah categorizes them in the Quran in 3 groups, but who doesn't get to categorize them? I don't get to go in my community and say, this level 1 right here, this guy is 2, 1.5. Okay, this guy is 3. I don't know if there was a 4, he would be 4. Bro, you don't get to do that. And why don't you get to do that? Because to address all of them, what did Allah say now? Let's add one more thing too. This mix, as we get ready for, if you think of faith as fire, a fire in your heart, and fire has heat, right? The people that have level 1, faith have the strongest fire. The people of level 2, maybe they have a candle, not quite a strong fire. And the people at level 3 barely have a spark there. Something may be left, but it's all gone. It was never there, you understand. So there's high temperature, mid temperature, and low temperature. Okay, in Makkah, if you get gathered all. The Muslims of Makkah, in the time of Makkah, and you checked the temperature would be high or low. The overall temperature would be high. Now the Muslims moved to Medina. and there are 1, 2, end. 3, if you check the average temperature now is the average. Temperature higher or lower, now it's lower. Because there are people of lesser temperature here. What I'm trying to say in simple language is the overall faith of the community has declined. Because now they're all together. The hypocrites are among them. The weaker Muslims are among them. The senior Muslims, the mature believers are among them, but the overall, the bigger picture, the temperature has dropped. These surahs from surah number 57 to surah number 66 is the Qur'an's way of talking to a community where the temperature has dropped and to help them raise the temperature, that this is the Qur'an's way of raising the temperature for that community. That's why some of them have to go back to the very basics. Because the heat of Iman that came in group number. One came because they were, the Makkan Quran was drilled into their hearts. For 13 years it was drilled into their hearts, and now in these surahs you will find some elements of what Quran of Quran. Because the temperature needs to be raised again. Is that making sense now? And so we get this profound introduction to the surah of 6 ayat. Just talking about Allah, that's why we get that introduction. Okay, this surah is going to be, we have a colleague, a student of mine who also works on structure in the Quran. I'm a huge proponent of that. Organization of the Quran, I believe in the divine organization of. The Quran, if you can see, that the architect of this hall put these columns in the right place for the structure to be held up, and the stage was designed at a certain distance. There was a calculation made, a mindful calculation to put this building together if a surah is a divine palace. As I describe it, surah is a divine palace, then the placement of all of its ayat, the placement of its subject matter, the organization of thought, the flow of the ideas in the surah, none of it is random. All of it is designed by Allah, as Hamfari put it, the one who organized the bones on the tips of every one of my fingers and every ligament did not overlook organizing his own speech, right? The one who organized every star in the heavens did not overlook organizing his own kamam in the Quran, right? So I'm a huge prop of understanding organization in the Quran. Within a surah, there's a design, there's structure, and there are different ways to try to contemplate that structure to understand. Something from that structure, my analysis is a little bit different from one of my students, I'll share both with you, but I'll tell you. Mine's better. Because it's mine, but I'll still share his, even though I'm not convinced of his as much. He's not convinced of mine as much. But in the interest of transparency, I'll share both in my understanding. This surah is made up of 6 parts. The way I see the structure of the surah is made up of how many 6 parts? And what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to go through part 1, part 2, part 3, all the way to part 6. And every time we finish a part, we'll review it and we'll say, how was this part organized? Then we'll go to part 2, and then we'll have a review session. How was part 2 organized? And then part 3, how was that organized? And we'll just kind of start to appreciate the organization of what Allah is saying, the design of what Allah is saying. You know, in any education, organization of thought isn't that important. In your courses, you take 101, then you take a 102, then you take a 20. Then you take a 202 inside of a course. You do chapter 1, then you do chapter 2, then there's organization of thought, right? So the Quran's own organization of thought is not like human organization. It's divine organization. It's different. And we should take time to appreciate it. That's going to be part of our agenda too, okay? So now that I've gotten that out of the way, some important things about organization. There's organization inside the surah, but there's also organization around the surah, around the surah. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things that are happening around the surah. I've already told you this is a group of surahs from which surah to which surah, all the way to anybody you remember. Good 57 to 66. This is one bunch of surahs. Okay, they're all revealed in Madinah. They're all similarly sized. They're all talking to the same problem. And half of them, a surah alid, 5 of them are beginning with declaring that everything speaks to everything, announces the perfection of Allah. So in half of these surahs, there's the opening is declaring God's. Perfection, declaring the perfection of Allah, but even within that, so I'll make a couple of quick observations about that I want you to know. We'll dive deep, inshallah, hopefully today, after into the first ayah. But what's interesting is there are only two places where Allah does the following. I'll give you the English so you understand. What I'm saying, if I say, I know whatever you're writing down and whatever you're writing down, I know whatever you're writing down and whatever you're writing down, how many times did I use the word whatever twice? But if I said, I know whatever you're writing down and you're writing down, how many times did I use the word whatever once now? Listen to the English. Translate everything, whatever is in the skies and the earth declares Allah's. Perfection, whatever is in the skies and the earth declares Allah's. Perfection, now let me say it again. Whatever is in the skies and whatever is in the earth declares Allah's perfection. Is there a difference? The first time I said whatever, how many times was the second time I said? Whatever, twice 5 surahs make this statement, but in 2 of them Allah says. Whatever is in the skies and the earth, whatever is in the skies and the earth declares Allah's perfection. In all the other surahs Allah says, whatever is in the skies and whatever is in the earth declares Allah's perfection. Okay, so only Hadid has whatever is in the skies and the earth. Without the second whatever, it's only one whatever and then the end of, you see whatever is in the skies and the earth declares Allah's perfection. 1 MA, not 2 M, everything else is. So the question is, how come there's a ma missing? What happened in these 2 places? It's really interesting. In the Quran, these small things also have a purpose if you're used to one palace made by Allah and you notice there was a man this side, and then you go to the next palace and you only notice one man, you don't notice the other man, like, hey, he did something different here. Why did he was is? There a ma here, no theirs, it's not supposed to be here, that's the other one, so why isn't it here? You'll find something. Incredible. Every time the next ayah is talking about something going on the earth. So this is a number 1 in most cases, this is ayah number 1a. Number 2, if a number 2 is talking about something going on the earth with the people of the world, then you'll find a second whatever. You'll find a second ma focusing on the earth. Because if I say, I know what's in this bottle and what's in this bottle, then I went out of my way too. Focus on the second bottle actually, because I could have just said, I know what's in this bottle, and in this bottle, I didn't have to say what twice. The fact that I said what a second time is unusual because I'm bringing unusual attention to the earth. You understand, cause you don't have to say it. You can just say whatever is in the skies and the earth. So the second ma is unusual. And whenever you see the second ma, read the next ayah. It will be about something about the people in the world, what's happening, a worldly matter every time.